in a young person in their 30s who was paralyzed from a neck injury. They took his own fat stem cells, injected his fat stem cells into his spinal cord right where it was broken. And guess what? It grew new spinal cord. And pretty soon, he started to be able to move his arms and his legs. Unbelievable. Genistein found in plant-based foods, like they could cut off the blood supply feeding cancers. A lot of these anti-androgenic substances like curcumin or like genistein or the catechinsin, they also directly help to manipulate our body to be able to burn body fat. When you get into your 40s and 50s and 60s, it's not natural that we start gaining weight and our metabolism slows down. 60 can be the new 20 if we let it. One of the things of some really, really brilliant cardiologists did is they were wondering, could we be borrowing those stem cells from body fat and using them somewhere else? Because stem cells are what we call context dependent. So if they're in fat, they'll make more fat. But if they're in another tissue, they'll make other tissues. So the cardiologist asks, what if you put them in a heart? All right, so can you imagine a cardiologist working with a plastic surgeon? Plastic surgeon does liposuction, sucks out the fat. All right, now, what do you do with this jar of liposuction fat? I'll tell you as a researcher, I'll kind of like take away all the mystery on this. You put a little enzyme in there. Enzyme kind of dissolves the fat up. It releases the cells separates the cells from the fat. You put it in something called a centrifuge. It spins around. All right. And when round and round she goes. And what happens is that the stem cells go to the bottom of the tube and the fat floats to the top of the tube as fat should. And then when you stop the spinner, you pour off the fat and now you got a tube with stem cells at the bottom. The plastic surgeon hands this tube to the cardiologist who takes these stem cells, puts it in a catheter, okay, and then snakes it through your groin up into your heart of somebody who has heart disease and pops it right into the heart. So now stem cells from your fat go into your heart and guess what happens? It grows new heart tissue. It grows blood vessels to feed the heart. Amazing. Not ready for prime time yet. This is not the strip mall inject in your knee kind of stem cell. This is like, I've been involved with this. I'm still involved with it. It's amazing to see some of the early success. Not ready for prime time yet. Okay. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, but amazing. So one of the things I wanted to write about in the book though, to show you just how powerful this is, I didn't want to talk about the hard part of it. This was my jaw dropper when I looked at it. Somebody did the same process of taking out liposuction fat, separating those stem cells in a young person, their 30s, who was paralyzed from a neck injury, quadriplegic, can't move their arms, can't move their legs, paralyzed, game over, right? In terms of, I mean, it's a whole lifetime, 30 years, a lifetime of disability, a serious disability. So this was a patient in a clinical trial where they took his own fat stem cells and put them in a brand new place. They took him out of his fat, isolated him, and injected his fat stem cells into his spinal cord right where it was broken, severed. And guess what? It grew new spinal cord. And pretty soon he started to be able to move his arms and his legs. Yeah, unbelievable. So stem cells reside in fat. Absolutely powerful. And so you can't be removing those stem cells, but there are certain foods you can eat that can actually prevent or slow down those stem cells from cloning themselves into a brand new fat. So there's a dietary way to control it as well. You don't have to remove it and give them to another doctor. You can actually eat foods that will actually contain it. Things like olive oil has a substance called hydroxyol, slows down adipostromal stem cells from growing and cloning themselves. Omega-3, marine omega-3 fatty acid you find in seafood or dietary supplements will also do the same thing. Lycopene found in tomatoes, okay, and watermelon as example, which all says lycopene, will actually kind of reprogram the stem cells to basically say, you know what, if you're thinking about making more fat, don't do it. Goji berries also can actually reprogram stem cells. And goji berries, it's amazing. It's one of those continuum. Like, you hear these days, you hear a lot about these medicinal foods that have been used in Asia for years, like cordyceps, mushrooms, which I saw in the marketplace the other day. It's really cool. But goji berries are something very common as an herbal medicine. And I think that one of the things that we need to remember is that when we're borrowing and exploring fascinating food substances that have been used traditionally for thousands of years as medicine in other cultures, we should be just a little cautious that this doesn't mean that we can just be playing around with the substance. But goji berries, which I love to put goji berries in tea. If you mix it, goji berries with tea, put a date, a dried date in there, put some chrysanthemum flower in there, you kind of create this really nice herbal tea. You can put or black tea, So you can actually find ways to extract some of these natural substances. Goji berries have bioactives like lutein and zeaxanthin, which is good for your vision. But some of these substances also reprogram your fat stem cells as well. In the late 1980s, I was super interested in finding ways to fight cancer by cutting off the blood supply. So I worked in a lab, and we were looking at before pharmaceuticals were developed, biopharmaceuticals were developed for this area. We were looking for natural sources, and we're looking for anything in nature that could give us a clue of how nature might provide a natural chemical that could cut off the blood supply to cancers. Now, we knew actually even back then, like licorice could do it. And licorice could actually cut off the blood supply to tumors. I'm actually talking about licorice. And it turns out that there's a natural chemical found in licorice called isoliquitrin. All right, now, as a researcher, one of the things that we're able to do is to know something's in a natural compound, take it out, and test it in the lab. We tested isoliquitrin on blood vessels that are grown to feed harmful cells like tumor blood vessels. And it actually powerfully stopped those extra blood vessels. But the thing that really brought it home for me, and I've never forgotten this, is a research study that was done by a Greek researcher working in Switzerland. His name was Ted Fosis. And he looked at the urine of villagers outside of Kyoto, Japan. These villagers were all vegetarians. They ate mostly soy, okay? And he had frozen jars of this urine. And his boss, his supervisor said, go find something interesting to do with the urine or toss it out. So he went to look for hormones inside the urine, thinking that he was a hormone. He was an endocrinologist, so he was interested looking at hormones. When he ran the urine underneath this thing called a mass spectrometry, okay, you see these spikes, and he found a spike that didn't belong in the human, and it only came from the soybean, and it was a spike of genine. So he cut out that spike, which we can do in the lab, and he tested it on blood vessels that would be feeding cancer. It immediately stopped those blood vessels from growing. And so this was to discover that genine found in plant-based foods like soybeans could actually be anti-androgenic, and they could cut off the blood supply feeding cancers. Really was a mind-blowing discovery. And I read this, and I know Ted Fosis, we had this conversation about it, and it was absolutely amazing to think about what other secrets might be in food that could help to control the blood vessels. Now remember earlier we talked about the fact that growing fat needs extra blood vessels, right? So it's trying to grow those blood vessels. If you deliberately cut off the blood vessels that are feeding fat, all right, it'll actually shrink tumors, and it also shrink fat. So although the tumor wants to grow more blood vessels and it can't, so it starts to die in the middle, if you then step in and do an intervention to really cut off the blood vessels, that fat mass will shrink. And this has been shown very conclusively in the lab that this can actually happen. Green tea, another the catechins, EGCG, powerful anti-androgenic, can cut off the blood supply feeding tumors, can cut off the blood supply feeding fat as well. So one of the reasons I really came up to this whole idea of body fat is not only my background in this research, thinking about, well, maybe fat growing the way that we talked about cloning itself, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, hypoxic in the middle, that to me resembles a tumor exactly. And so the question is, could we tame the tumor by taming the blood supply? And I remembered the work that was done earlier. And it turns out that many of the foods that I wrote about my first book that are anti-androgenic, my first book being Eat to Beat Disease, more than 300 foods, there's a whole chapter on anti-androgenic cancer-starving foods or blood vessel taming, flu foods. And I started to realize here was this whole opportunity to look at ways of taming our body fat as well In the epidemiological study, turmeric has a natural chemical called curcumin. And again, I'm a scientist, so leave the tongue twisters to me. But just know that we've actually discovered some of the specific actives, bioactives that are in these foods, powerful anti-androgenic. But a lot of these anti-androgenic substances like curcumin and turmeric, or like janine in soy, or the cacans in tea, as it turns out, they also directly help to manipulate our body to be able to burn body fat, which is really interesting. So this is sort of like multiple job descriptions, multitaskers. That's the amazing thing that research is discovering. Like I study food as medicine. Now, food as medicine, just like medicines, like we discover aspirin treats headache. Oh, wait a minute. It actually can help to thin your blood and actually helps to, prevent heart attack and that kind of stuff. So we're beginning to rediscover that in Mother Nature's pharmacy with an F, not a PH, that what she has imbued in the foods, the whole foods that we have, are all these natural chemicals that have multiple tasks in our body. And when it comes to food and health, it's not just about the food. It's about how our body responds to what you put inside it and what those chemicals are actually activating, those pathways, the domino effects that they trigger once we actually eat them. And some of the foods that actually cut off the blood supply to fat and cancers also turn on the engine of our metabolism to burn down harmful body fat. Many of the foods that are associated with high antioxidative properties, right? These are phytochemicals. These are flavonols, polyphenols, all actually are able to assist us. I mean, we talked about some of them already. Green tea, actually wonderful antioxidant properties, but it's really, think about it less as what you see on the label of somebody trying to sell you some, healthy, specifically healthy tea. But think about it as really just sort of boosting your natural health defenses, helping your DNA protect itself. Tomatoes, watermelon, they've got lycopene. They also are wonderful, how like lycopene is so powerful that if you actually have a cup of tomato juice or have 2 slices of watermelon before you go out to the beach, like a couple of hours before, so have lunch, make sure you have some tomato juice or watermelon, couple slices of watermelon, average slices of watermelon before you go out to the beach. It'll actually protect your body from ultraviolet radiation damage from the sun that you're going to get on a beach by 60%. Just by having the lycopene in your system. And so this is actually how we can make some of these subtle and delicious, tasty choices that actually will help us as we navigate through our lives. And so it's no secret, I think, that in the Mediterranean, many times you have a tomato salad at lunchtime before people go back out into the sun or to the beach. Whole foods, as we're going to this research, and as a food and medicine guy, researcher, these foods that we're discovering are like Swiss Army knives, all right? They got all kinds of little new tricks that you didn't realize. Pull something out, it can do this and it can do that. Oh, wait a minute, there's another tool in there too. Oh my gosh, let's keep on pulling and discovering. That's why, I think that, in the health and wellness space, there are lots and lots of people talking about some real research, exciting research. We're talking about longevity, we're talking about better aging. We're talking about all kinds of different aspects of vitality. We're talking about metabolism. The key thing is not to oversell it. All right. And to realize that we're still at the beginning of this discovery. But even at the beginning, what we're finding is it's like opening the shades of your window. Like it's jaw-dropping. It's mind-blowing what it is our foods can do for us if we make wise choices. Because sunscreen is just a thin layer in the top that you got to reapply, and once you get into water or once you sweat it off, this type of protection, antioxidant protection, DNA protection from the inside out, takes advantage of your 40 trillion cells, uses food to power it up even more, to be more vigorous on your behalf, and it protects you from the inside out. That's the way to go. Kiwis you can find almost anywhere these days. They're a fruit from Southeast Asia, fuzzy on the outside. By the way, most people don't think they can eat the skin of kiwi, but in fact, you can put the skin into a blender and you get a ton of the natural dietary fiber from the skin. It's really packed. But the flesh, which is either green or golden, is sort of mildly sweet. The golden kiwi is a little bit sweeter, but I like the green ones. Got these little dark seeds, wonderful source of antioxidant activity in kiwi. It's got a ton of vitamin C. It's packed with dietary fiber. And, one kiwi a day will actually protect your DNA, again, by about 60%. All right. And if you had to eat 3 kiwis for breakfast, for example, pretty easy to do. If you if you cut up the kiwi and put it in chunks, you could be eating that as a breakfast, as I have. Basically, that starts to build back damaged DNA. So one kind of is like a missile shield, prevents the damage from coming in by about 60%. That's just 1 kiwi a day. Simple. But then you add 3, any DNA that did get damaged, it will start to repair it. It sends out the road crew to fill up the potholes. First of all, our immune system, mostly in our gut, about 70% of our immune system is found inside our gut, in the walls of our gut, our intestines. So think of your intestines like a garden hose. If you cut that garden hose in half and you look down the cross section, you'll see in the wall of the garden hose, that's where 70% of our immune system lives. So not surprisingly, our gut microbiome actually speaks to our immune system, right? So our gut microbiome also talks to our metabolism. And so here is where gut health, which is a loose term that talks about a healthy ecosystem that our diet and lifestyle can actually have a lot of interaction with, is connected to our immune system. But surprisingly, up to 20% of our immune system's also found in our body fat. So that's a big surprise, right? Like, remember I told you our fat's an organ. It produces hormones. Our fats also can house the stem cells to make more of itself, but may be useful for other parts as well. And now the new science, sort of our body fat and our metabolism, tells us that actually our fat actually contains immunity as well. Now, when we develop extra body fat and it becomes pro-inflammatory and we derail our metabolism, our ability for our fat to send out immune cells is completely compromised. And this is why we need to really protect ourselves against the harms of extra body fat. So again, on a big picture level, all these correlations of bad chronic diseases that we struggle with in people who are overweight or obese, it starts to make perfect sense why that might be, because good, healthy levels of fat are perfectly fine, but excess body fat is really harmful. It can actually derail our immunity as well, suppresses our immunity. Now, one of the things that I think is really, really important to think about, and this has to do with what we now know about extra body fat, is how our metabolism, one of the things that's most important for us to understand is how our normal metabolism is hardwired. And this is really the soul of my book, is really the fact the new science of the metabolism teaches us that all human beings are born to run through 4 phases of metabolism throughout our entire life cycle. Okay. So, and this, by the way, is a discovery that was made only 2 years ago. So it's so spanking new and it's changed everything we know about human metabolism, that the old textbooks are being ripped up and thrown out the window, and the new ones haven't even been written yet. So this is research that is really, really jaw-droppingly important, because it changes our understanding of ourselves. Our own nature has been changed through this discovery. So let me explain, and I'll tell you how body fat fits into it and then connect it back to immunity. So 2 years ago, there was a researcher named Herman Ponzer, who worked with 90 colleagues. This is like a 90+ research team, big research team across 20 countries, global, all right? And they studied 6,000 people. That's a lot of people in exactly the same way. They studied their metabolism, and they studied people that were from 2 days old to 90 years old. That's the entire human lifespan. Think about how unusual that research project is designed. It's one of the most ambitious metabolism research studies ever undertaken in human history. And what's remarkable is they studied every individual from 2 days old to 90 years old in exactly the same way across 20 countries, which is all awesome to me. What they did is they gave people a drink of water. It's the simplest thing that you could do, but they tweaked the water in a special way. The atoms of the water is H2O. They tweaked the hydrogen, H, so that a little bit, and they tweaked the oxygen, O, a little bit, so that you can measure it. So when they drank the water, their body metabolized the hydrogen and the oxygen, and they can measure the metabolism in their breath, what you're exhaling. They can measure in the blood how hydrogen oxygen got manipulated, and that was measured in the urine. Standard research study, again, 6,000 people, 20 countries, 2 days old to 90 years old, most ambitious metabolism study ever undertaken in human history. And what did they find when they looked at the output for what human metabolism is? In the beginning, all over the map. Everyone's readings were different. There was no way of making any sense of it, just like you might expect, right? Except we now live in the age of artificial intelligence and really supercomputing. So what they did is they developed an algorithm based on the size, the body size of the individual that they were studying, the 2-day-old versus a 90-year-old. And they were able to, in this algorithm, subtract the impact on metabolism of excess body fat, the very thing we were talking about. All right. And when they removed the excess body fat from every individual, every data point, and what they found from out of the sea of confusing result data, they found that every human went through 4 phases of metabolism. It was crystal clear. It was like uncloaking, the statue of David. It's just a lumpy thing over here. Nobody knows what's in it. You pull it out and you see crystal clear. Human beings are hardwired to go through 4 phases of metabolism from the time they were born until the end of life. And here's basically what those stages, those phases are. The first stage, phase 1, is from when you're born all the way to your 15 one-year-old. Your metabolism is going up like a rocket ship to 50% above adult metabolism level. So babies are like firing up their engines big time. All right, now that's phase 1, stage 1. Second stage is from 1-year-old to 20 years old. Metabolism is going from that high level, that elevated level, going down, down, down from 1 to 20. It's decreasing. Now think about what that means and how surprising that is. Right through the teenage years, adolescence, where kids are shooting up in their height, they're eating 2 dinners, they're bouncing off the wall with energy. Every parent goes, yeah, their metabolism must be going crazy. Not. So the truth of the matter is that between 1-year-old and 20-year-olds, our metabolism is actually going down to adult levels. All right. But it's heading downwards. That's the second stage. The third stage is from age 20 to age 60. Guess what? Metabolism is rock steady. It's hardwired not to change. It's a flat line. Our metabolism doesn't change. Isn't designed to change when you have your first baby, when you actually hit menopause, when you get into your 40s and 50s and 60s. So it's not natural that we start gaining weight and our metabolism slows down in our middle ages. That's a gigantic eye-opener, a jaw-dropping. That's a mic drop, actually, from this research study. It changes how we understand how humans are designed. Our bodies don't want to actually gain weight and be fat. Our energy doesn't want to go low. We are hardwired like a laptop with an operating system to be rock stable from 20 to 60. What that means, 60 can be the new 20 if we let our metabolism do its thing naturally. Now, the final stage, from 60 to 90, last phase of life, our metabolism does decline slightly. All right, it goes down only 17% from 60 to 90. So 90, you're only 17% of what you were when you were 60. But 90 also means that you were only 17% when you were 20 years old. That means that aging, okay, doesn't have to be declining. It doesn't have to be decrepit. We decline a little bit, but we actually have the So this is what happens when you remove the effect of excess body fat. This is what our hardwiring is. Now, here's basically what's really surprising. When you add the effect of excess body fat back into the equation, remember I told you they've removed it to find the statue of David? When you put it back in, you know what excess body fat does to your hardwired metabolism? It crushes it. When you add extra body fat, it crushes your metabolism.